pure and unsure. She whispered, "Will it hurt?" And the undercover billionaire froze at the truth. "Hello, everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's return to our main character. The flickering fluorescent lights of the small neighborhood clinic buzzed softly, casting a pale glow across the cramped waiting room that smelled faintly of antiseptic and old vinyl seats. Adrian sat there dressed in a cheap gray hoodie and worn jeans, fingers tapping nervously against his knee, trying to blend into the very world he was here to understand. The world most people assumed he had never touched. Then she walked in. Small, bundled in a thin jacket not meant for the late-night cold, clutching her arm as if holding herself together. Her name, he would later learn, was Lily. But in that moment, she was just the girl with tired eyes and a bravery so fragile it pulled the air right out of his lungs. She checked in with the receptionist, her voice barely above a whisper, then found the only empty seat right beside him. He could feel her shiver, not from the temperature, but from something deeper, something like fear mixed with exhaustion. "Are you okay?" he asked softly. She nodded too quickly. "Yeah, I've never done this alone before." A nurse called her name, and she rose, hesitated, then turned back to him as if needing one more breath of courage. "Do you mind coming with me, just until the door? I know it's strange. I don't want to faint again. The words hit him harder than he expected. He stood and walked with her down the narrow hallway, the walls lined with outdated posters about flu shots and payment plans. When they reached the exam room door, she paused, fingers twisting together, her eyes glossy under the dim light. "Will it hurt?" she whispered, pure, unsure, apologetic for even asking. And that right there was the moment he froze. Not because of her question, but because of what it revealed. She wasn't afraid of the needle. She was afraid of the cost. The pain wasn't her enemy, poverty was. He'd seen it earlier when her wallet fell open in her lap. The bus pass, the credit card denial slip, the folded medical bill dated 3 months ago. She was the reason he was undercover in the first place. Not the numbers in spreadsheets, not the annual reports prepared by his executives. Real people built on quiet bravery. Real people who asked, "Will it hurt?" about far more than medicine. He swallowed, steadying himself. "You'll be okay," he murmured, and he meant it more than she could ever know. The nurse motioned for her. Lily stepped inside, but before the door fully closed, she looked back at him one last time, a small look, but one that lodged somewhere under his ribs. When the latch clicked shut, Adrian stood alone in the hallway longer than he needed to. He was supposed to be a ghost here, unseen, unnoticed, gathering insight for the charity foundation he'd built from a distance for too long. But one whisper had shattered that distance completely. He didn't know yet that this night would change them both. He only knew that the moment she asked that trembling question, the undercover billionaire froze because, for the first time, he understood what real fear looked like and what real courage felt like. And he couldn't walk away now, no matter how well his disguise fit. When Lily stepped into the exam room, the door latched quietly behind her. But Adrian remained in the hallway long after she disappeared from sight, staring at the faded paint on the wall, as if it held answers he had been searching for months. The hum of the air conditioner rattled softly overhead, and every few seconds a nurse wheeled a cart past him, but he barely noticed. All he could hear was her whisper replaying in his mind. "Will it hurt?" He had heard thousands of questions directed at him in boardrooms, investor summits, and foundation meetings, but none had ever cut through him the way those 3 small words did. It was not about fear of pain. It was about fear of everything that came with pain when you were poor. Debt, time off work, instability, the possibility of losing the little you had. As he stood there, the nurse opened the door again, her voice calm. "She is okay, just a little shaken. You can go." Except he did not go. Not right away. He waited until Lily emerged, holding a small cotton pad to her arm. Her eyes still glossy but steadier than before. When she saw him, she exhaled softly, almost embarrassed. "You did not have to wait," she said. "I know," he replied, and it was the truth. But something in him could not leave her alone in that hallway. She shifted her weight, wincing slightly. I am just going to pay the bill, and then I will walk home. It is only a few blocks. Adrian nodded, but inside, his stomach tightened. A few blocks at this hour in this neighborhood meant flickering streetlights and empty sidewalks. Still, he stayed beside her as she approached the reception desk. The receptionist clicked her tongue the moment she pulled up Lily's file. It seems your previous balance is still outstanding. You will need to settle at least part of it today. Lily's face drained of color. I can pay a little, she murmured. I just need the rest of the week for the rest. The receptionist gave a practiced, tired shrug. Payments are automated. If there is a remaining balance, it goes to collections. Lily pressed her lips together. Her hand trembled as she reached for her wallet, and when she opened it, Adrian caught a glimpse of what he had already suspected. 2 bus vouchers, a battered debit card, a single $5 bill. She slid the bill forward. The receptionist took it without emotion and printed a receipt. Lily whispered, "Thank you," and stepped away before the woman could reply. Outside, the night air was colder than before. The parking lot lights buzzed overhead, casting long shadows across the cracked pavement. Lily hugged her jacket tight. I will be fine from here, she said, though she looked anything but fine. Adrian swallowed the instinct to step in. She did not need a savior. She needed someone to witness her struggles without pity. So he simply said, "If it is all right, I will walk with you until I reach my turn." She hesitated, then nodded. The two of them stepped onto the sidewalk, their footsteps echoing down the quiet street. For a while, neither spoke. Then Lily broke the silence. I am sorry if I bothered you earlier. I just panic sometimes. I know it is silly. It is not silly, he said. Fear is real. She gave a short laugh that held more exhaustion than humor. Yeah, well, I guess life gets heavy sometimes. They passed a closed hardware store, its metal shutters rattling in the wind. Adrian glanced at her. You live far from here. Just a couple blocks, she said, but her voice wavered. He could tell she was lying to make him feel better. She hugged her arms again, and her breath fogged in the chilled air. They reached the first intersection, the crosswalk light, flickering weakly. She turned to him with a small, polite smile. This is where you said you turn, right? He paused. In truth, he had no destination in this direction at all. He had been following her path, because leaving did not sit right with him, but revealing that felt too intimate, too soon. So he simply nodded. Yeah, here. She shifted her weight and whispered, Thank you for walking with me. Most people do not even look at me twice. He forced a soft smile. People should look more. She gave him a strange little glance, almost as if trying to understand him, then pulled her jacket tighter and stepped into the next block alone. Adrian watched her disappear into the dim glow of the streetlight, her small figure swallowed by the night. He stood there long after she was gone, the wind tugging at his hoodie, and for the first time in years, he felt something unfamiliar settle in his chest. Purpose. This was why he had gone undercover. Not for data, not for reports, but for people like her. And he knew with a certainty that surprised him that this was not the last time he would see Lily. Not if he had anything to do with it. The night after Adrian walked Lily to the intersection stayed with him longer than it should have. Even as he returned to the small rented room he used for his undercover work, he kept seeing the way she clutched her jacket, the way she tried to smile even when her voice trembled, and the way she thanked him as if no one had chosen to stand beside her in a very long time. He sat on the edge of the narrow bed, the springs creaking under his weight, and stared at the peeling wallpaper while the city hummed outside. This was not the world he knew from penthouses and glass boardrooms. This was the world he had been trying to understand from spreadsheets and research reports, and Lily, without knowing it, had made that world painfully real. The next morning, he woke early, washed his face in the cracked sink, and stepped out into the cool air with his hood pulled low. The soup kitchen several blocks away was opening soon, and if his memory served him right, it was one of the few places in the neighborhood where people like Lily showed up to volunteer or grab a meal when money ran too thin. He had no guarantee she would be there, yet he found himself walking faster than necessary. When he reached the building, a faded sign reading, Community Care Kitchen hung crooked above the entrance. A line had already formed, and volunteers inside moved quickly behind metal counters. The warm smell of broth, onions, and fresh bread drifted out into the street. As he stepped in, a familiar voice floated through the clatter of trays and voices. Adrian froze before turning. Lily stood behind the serving counter, with her hair tied back in a loose ponytail, wearing an oversized apron splattered with soup, smiling gently at a woman in a worn coat. Lily ladled a scoop of stew into the woman's bowl and said, "Come back for seconds if you need more. No one leaves hungry." The woman nodded with watery eyes. Lily's voice, soft but steady, carried a kindness that wrapped around the room. Adrian found himself stepping into the line, even though he was not here for food. When he reached the counter, Lily glanced up, and surprise flickered across her face, followed by something warmer. "You are here," she said quietly. He shrugged in an attempt to seem casual, though his heart thudded harder than it should. "Thought I would see what this place was about." She slid a bowl toward him. "It is nothing special," she said, though the pride in her voice betrayed her. "I help out here when I can. They helped my family when things were bad." He took the bowl, more as a gesture than anything else, and moved aside. She finished her shift a few minutes later, washed her hands at the sink, and joined him at one of the small wooden tables. "You really came," she said again, as if she needed to confirm it. "Most people never come back after seeing all this." Adrian stirred the spoon in the bowl, though he had no intention of eating. "It matters," he said, "and you matter." She blinked, startled, as if no one had ever said such a thing to her without wanting something in return. Before she could respond, a sudden commotion at the front door made them both turn. Two security guards in dark jackets stepped inside, scanning the room. Lily went stiff beside him. Adrian recognized them immediately. They were from Hailtech's private security division, but they wore plain clothing now, probably assigned to find him after he had gone undercover longer than scheduled. "Sir," one of them called, eyes landing on him. "There you are. We have been searching everywhere. The board has been asking for—" Lily's breath caught. Her eyes snapped to Adrian, wide and disbelieving. "Sir?" The guard stepped closer. "Chief Executive Officer Hale, your scheduled briefing." Adrian raised a hand quickly. "Stop." But it was too late. The entire room had fallen silent. Volunteers stared. The line of guests watched with confusion. And Lily, who had just begun to let him into her small, fragile world, took one step back. You are the Chief Executive Officer?" she whispered, her voice cracking. "You are the billionaire from Hailtech?" Her face reflected shock, betrayal, and something worse, humiliation. "So last night, in the clinic, you were lying the whole time." Adrian felt the weight of every pair of eyes in the room pressing on him. "Lily, please let me explain," he said gently. She shook her head, her shoulders tightening, as if bracing for another hit from life. "Why would someone like you pretend to be someone like me?" Her voice was small, wounded. "Was it a joke? An experiment? Some undercover project to see how the poor live?" "No," he said firmly, stepping toward her. "I was trying to understand reality, not manipulate it, and not manipulate you." But she stepped back again. "I trusted you for 5 minutes," she whispered, pain trembling through her words. "And that was 5 minutes too many." She turned away, pushing through the kitchen doors, and Adrian felt something inside him fracture as she disappeared. The guards hovered uncertainly, waiting for instructions, but Adrian lifted a hand to silence them. He did not care about the briefing. He did not care about the board. He cared about the girl who had just walked out of the room, as if he were the very thing she feared most. And he knew, without a trace of doubt, that he could not let that be the end of their story. Adrian rushed out the back door of the soup kitchen just moments after Lily disappeared, the cold morning air slapping against him, as if trying to pull him fully into the reality he had just broken. The alley behind the building smelled faintly of bread crusts and rain-soaked cardboard, and the narrow strip of sidewalk was already empty except for a single grocery bag swinging from a bent metal hook. She was gone. He jogged to the street, scanning both directions, ignoring the stares of people who recognized him from news articles or company billboards. His security team followed several steps behind, unsure whether to intervene or simply observe, but he raised a hand sharply, signaling them to stay back. He needed to face this alone. After a block of searching, he finally spotted her crossing the street, her pace fast, her head bent low, her hands shaking as she wiped at her eyes. He felt something twist painfully inside him. He called out, "Lily, please wait." She did not stop. She did not even look at him. He crossed the street quickly, dodging a honking car, and caught up with her near the bus stop. "Lily," he said again, breathless, "please let me explain." She turned to him with a look that made him feel smaller than he had ever felt in his entire life. "Explain what?" she said, her voice trembling. "Explain why a billionaire pretended to be poor so he could follow people like me around? Explain why you let me talk to you like you were just another guy trying to get by? Explain why you waited for me outside a clinic when you could have paid for the entire building with the change in your pocket." The words hit him harder than any investor meeting, any board confrontation, any crisis he had ever faced. He swallowed, forcing himself to stay steady. "I went undercover to see the world my foundation claims to serve," he said. "I needed to know the truth, not the numbers people polish before showing them to me." Lily shook her head. "That has nothing to do with me." "It does," he said quietly, "because the moment I met you, this stopped being just research." Her breath caught, but she looked away quickly. "Do not," she whispered. "Do not make this about feelings. You lied. You stood next to me in that clinic while I worried about $5, and you said nothing." Adrian stepped forward. "Because I knew that telling you the truth in that moment would have changed everything. And not in a good way." She let out a shaky laugh. "You are right. It would have changed everything. I would have walked away right then." He flinched at the honesty. "Lily, I never meant to hurt you. I am here because I want to help, not because I pity you." She tensed at the word. Pity, as if it stung her skin. "I do not want your help," she said sharply. "I do not want anything from you." The bus approached, its brakes squeaking as it pulled alongside the curb. She stepped toward it. Adrian's chest tightened, the kind of tightness he had never experienced in all the years of building empires and battling competitors. "Lily," he said, his voice low, "I did not lie to you because I thought less of you. I lied because I saw something in you that made me want to be honest for the first time in years." She hesitated, her hand gripping the cold metal bar on the bus door. People behind her waited impatiently, but she did not move. Her shoulders rose and fell with a long, unsteady breath. "You do not know me," she whispered. "You do not know what my life is like." "Then let me learn," he said softly. "Let me understand." She shook her head again, but this time with less force, as if exhaustion had softened the edges of her anger. "You cannot fix people by learning their stories," she said. "And I am not some project for your foundation." "You are not," he said firmly. "You are Lily, and I regret that the first thing I gave you was a lie." The driver tapped the glass impatiently. Lily stepped onto the bus without another word. But before she walked to the back, she looked at Adrian one last time, a look filled with conflict, pain, disappointment, and a trace of something he could not name. Then she sat down, turned her face toward the window, and the bus pulled away slowly. Adrian watched her until the bus disappeared down the street, leaving him standing alone on the sidewalk. His security team approached cautiously, but he did not acknowledge them. His mind was already somewhere else, racing with a single certainty. He had broken something fragile, and he was going to spend every moment that followed figuring out how to make it right. For the next 2 days, Adrian found himself unable to focus on a single meeting, report, or decision, even though he was physically present in conference rooms filled with executives who depended on his leadership. His mind kept drifting back to the bus pulling away, to the rare look in Lily's eyes before she turned away, a look that felt like a door closing on something he had barely begun to understand. He replayed every moment of their brief connection, trying to figure out where he could have stepped differently, spoken differently, or confessed sooner. But every path led to the same painful truth. He had hurt her. Not intentionally, but deeply. And the fact that she had trusted him, even for a short moment, made the weight of that hurt even heavier. On the third morning, after a restless night of pacing through his penthouse and staring at the lights below, he made a decision. If the only way to understand the Foundation's impact was to walk in the world Lily lived in, then the only way to make things right was to return to that world without hiding, without disguise, and without the walls he usually used to protect himself from vulnerability. He ditched the chauffeured car and suit jacket and instead walked several blocks through the crisp morning air until he reached the neighborhood where he had first met her. The city felt different on foot, more real, more urgent. The sidewalks were cracked, the storefront signs flickered, and the people passing by looked exhausted in ways no stock market chart could ever represent. He reached the community kitchen just as they opened for the afternoon shift. Volunteers hurried around inside, but Lily was not among them. He asked one of the older volunteers, a woman with gray hair pinned neatly behind her ears, if she had seen Lily lately. The woman looked at him carefully, as if trying to understand his intentions before answering. "She has not been here since Monday," she said. Something happened. She was upset. Adrian felt that familiar twist inside him again. "Do you know where she works?" he asked. The woman hesitated but eventually nodded toward a narrow street. "She sometimes cleans offices over there. Night shifts, long hours, hard work." Adrian thanked her and walked in that direction, scanning the storefronts until he finally spotted a dimly lit cleaning service tucked between a laundromat and a pawn shop. The door jingled softly when he stepped inside. A man wearing a faded uniform looked up from behind a cluttered desk. "Can I help you?" Adrian cleared his throat. "I am looking for one of your workers." "Her name is Lily." The man frowned. "She did not show up last night. Said she was sick or something. Honestly, I am surprised she called at all. Most people just disappear." Adrian's heart tightened. She had stayed home. She was hurting enough to stay hidden. He thanked the man and stepped back outside, the weight of the afternoon pressing heavily against him. If she would not come out, he would go to her. He remembered the direction she walked the night he escorted her after the clinic. It had to be close. He walked several blocks, looking for apartment buildings with lights on in the middle of the day. He found one with peeling paint, mailboxes stuffed with flyers, and a narrow staircase leading up to several units. Something in his gut said she might be here. He climbed the stairs slowly, listening for any familiar voice or sound, when he suddenly heard coughing from behind one of the doors. A soft, muffled cough, followed by a tiny gasp of pain. He froze, then approached the door gently. "Lily?" he called softly. Silence. Then a faint rustling. He tried again, quieter. "Lily, it is Adrian." Another silence, longer this time, and he could almost feel her weighing whether or not to respond. Finally, he heard her voice, fragile and strained. "What are you doing here?" The sound of her voice was enough to break whatever distance he had been trying to respect. He rested his hand lightly on the doorframe. "I came because you did not deserve to face everything alone," he said. "I came because I am sorry, not as a chief executive officer, not as someone undercover, just as me." The lock clicked softly from the other side, hesitant and slow. And Adrian knew that whatever waited behind that door would shape everything that came next. The door opened only a few inches at first, just wide enough for Lily's tired eyes to appear in the narrow gap. She looked pale, her hair pulled into a messy knot, her cheeks flushed from fever. Even in the dim light of the hallway, Adrian could see that she was not just emotionally exhausted but physically unwell. She hesitated, gripping the edge of the door as if deciding whether to let him step inside or close him out again. After a long moment, she exhaled softly and opened it wider. "You should not be here," she murmured, her voice frail. "I am sick. You have meetings and executives and a whole empire waiting for you. None of that matters right now," Adrian said quietly as he stepped into the small studio apartment. The air felt warm and heavy, carrying the faint scent of cough syrup and the metallic tang of an old radiator. The shades were half drawn, letting in a thin strip of afternoon light that cut across the cluttered floor, where work uniforms were folded neatly beside a stack of bills and a nearly empty bottle of cold medicine. Lily sank onto the edge of her bed, which doubled as her couch, her table, and her place of rest. She winced as she sat, pressing a hand to her temple. "It is just a fever," she said, though she sounded more like she was trying to reassure herself. "I will be fine." Adrian knelt slightly, so he could meet her gaze. "You do not look fine," he said, his tone gentle. "When was the last time you ate something?" She shrugged weakly. "Yesterday, maybe." He felt something twist sharply in his chest. This was the reality people hid behind pride and self-reliance, the reality he had only glimpsed in spreadsheets and reports. He moved to her tiny kitchenette, found a box of crackers and a single can of soup in the cabinet, and returned with both. "Can I make this for you?" he asked. Lily blinked, taken aback. "You cook?" "I can manage soup," he said softly. She let out a breath that might have been a laugh in a better moment. "You do not have to." "I want to," he replied simply. As he heated the soup on the small electric stove, he noticed the details of her life scattered around the apartment. A folded bus schedule taped to the fridge, a notebook filled with handwritten reminders for work shifts, a stack of unopened mail held together with a rubber band. These were things he had never needed to think twice about in his world, yet here they were, carrying the weight of her daily existence. When the soup was ready, He placed the bowl on the small bedside table and helped her sit up a little. She took a spoonful slowly, her hands trembling. "Thank you," she whispered. "You did not have to do any of this." "I know," he said, "but I want to." She looked away, fighting something inside her. "You are making it harder," she said quietly. "Harder to stay angry. Harder to protect myself." Adrian took a slow breath. "I am not here to take advantage of your trust," he said. "I am here because I care. And I need you to know that caring was not part of any assignment or project. It was real. It is real." She closed her eyes for a moment, leaning back against the pillow. "You ruined something," she whispered. "I do not know if you meant to, but you did." "I know," he said, "and I am trying to earn the chance to rebuild it." She opened her eyes again, studying him as if searching for truth in the lines of his face. "Why me?" she asked softly. "You could talk to anyone. You could help thousands. Why are you standing in my apartment making soup?" He swallowed, caught between honesty and vulnerability. "Because when you asked, 'Will it hurt?' you were not asking about the shot. You were asking about the life you were trapped in. And I froze because I realized how small my understanding was compared to your reality." She looked down, her fingers curling around the blanket. "I do not want your pity." "It is not pity," he said firmly. "It is respect. And maybe something more." Her breath caught again, but before she could respond, a harsh cough shook her entire body. Adrian steadied her, his hand gentle against her back. "It is all right," he murmured. "I am here." When she finally calmed, she leaned her head against the wall, drained. "I do not know if I can trust you," she said. Her voice was barely audible. "You do not have to decide today," Adrian replied. "Just let me be here for now." She exhaled slowly, and though she did not answer, she did not ask him to leave either. In that tiny, quiet apartment, surrounded by the fragile evidence of her difficult life, Adrian felt something shift between them, something soft and unspoken. For the first time since everything shattered, she allowed him to stay. The fever broke sometime in the middle of the night, but exhaustion clung to Lily like a heavy blanket. She drifted in and out of sleep, the room dim, except for the soft glow of the street lamp leaking through the blinds. Each time she opened her eyes, she saw Adrian sitting nearby in the old wooden chair he had pulled close to her bed. He had not slept. He had not left. He simply stayed, watching over her with a quiet focus that made her chest tighten with a mix of confusion and something she refused to name. By morning, her breathing was steadier, though her voice was still weak. She pushed herself upright, her hair falling unevenly over her shoulder. "You really stayed," she murmured, a note of disbelief lingering beneath her words. Adrian nodded, though fatigue showed in the faint shadows beneath his eyes. "I said I would." She looked away, uncomfortable with how easily he said it. "You did not have to." "I know," he replied, his voice low and calm, "but I wanted to be here if you needed anything." She let out a slow breath and tried to stand, but the moment her feet touched the cold floor, her body swayed. Adrian reached out instinctively, steadying her with one arm. "Easy," he said. "You are still weak." She leaned against him for a moment before pulling back, embarrassed. "I just need water." He fetched a glass for her from the kitchen sink and handed it to her. She drank slowly, then sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the pile of bills on the table. "I missed 2 cleaning shifts," she whispered. "That means my paycheck will be short, and I already owe rent." Adrian followed her gaze and felt another wrench in his chest. "Let me help," he said softly. "Not because I pity you, but because you should not have to fight everything alone." Her expression hardened instantly. "I cannot accept your money." "I am not offering money," he replied gently. "I am offering support. There is a difference." She shook her head stubbornly. "Support from you looks like charity." "No," he said, his voice steady. "Support from me looks like believing in you. That is why I came. That is why I stayed." She rubbed her forehead, torn between exhaustion, pride, and the lingering sting of betrayal. "I do not understand why you care. You barely know me." Adrian hesitated, choosing his words carefully. "Sometimes you meet someone who makes you want to be better than the person you were yesterday. You did that for me, Lily." She froze. Her fingers tightened around the blanket. "You cannot say things like that," she whispered. "Not when everything between us started with a lie." He nodded slowly. "You are right, and I will not run from that. I lied about who I was, but I never lied about what I felt." Her eyes shimmered with conflict, but before she could speak, a sudden knock echoed from the front door. Both of them went still. It was sharp, impatient, and far too forceful to belong to a neighbor. Lily looked toward the door nervously. "Do not answer it," she whispered. But the knock came again, louder this time. Adrian stepped forward automatically, placing himself between her and the entrance. "Stay behind me," he said. She gave him a puzzled look. "Who would come here this early?" A harsh voice called from outside. "Lily Matthews? This is about your overdue medical balance. You need to open the door." Lily's entire body tensed. The color drained from her face. "They sent collectors?" she whispered, her voice shaking. "Already?" Adrian felt something inside him ignite, a surge of anger he rarely allowed himself to feel. He had seen the invoices, the predatory fees, the fine print meant to trap people. He had read the reports about families crushed under medical debt, but he had never stood in front of someone actively being threatened by it. "Lily," he said calmly, "is this real? Are they legally allowed to do that?" "They are not supposed to come in person," she whispered, pulling her knees closer as if bracing for impact. "But they do anyway. They scare people into paying." Another knock rattled the thin door. "Miss Matthews, open the door now." Adrian's jaw tightened. He walked to the door but stopped just before touching the handle. He turned back to her with a steady, anchoring tone. "Let me speak to them." Her eyes widened in alarm. "No, you cannot. They will know something is wrong. Please do not make it worse." But he shook his head. "I will not let anyone frighten you in your own home." She stared at him, torn between fear and the fragile trust that had been forming since last night. "Adrian," she whispered shakily, "please do not make a scene." "I am not making a scene," he said softly. "I am setting a boundary." He placed his hand on the doorknob as the collectors knocked again. In that small apartment, in a neighborhood forgotten by most of the world, Lily watched the one person she thought she could never trust step forward to protect her. And for the first time, she felt the faintest pull of something she had been trying desperately to push away. The door creaked as Adrian began to open it, and everything that followed would change the dynamic between them forever. The door opened only halfway before Adrian stepped into the frame, blocking the collector's view of Lily entirely. The two men standing outside wore windbreakers with clipboards tucked under their arms, their expressions stern in the way people look when they are used to being obeyed. One of them straightened his posture. "We are looking for Lily Matthews. She has an outstanding balance that must be addressed immediately." Adrian kept his voice level, controlled, and calm. "You will not speak to her while she is sick. You can speak to me instead." The man narrowed his eyes. "And who are you?" Adrian did not blink. "Someone who will not let you harass a woman in her home." The man scoffed, shifting his weight. "Sir, this is not harassment. This is a legal matter. If she does not pay, the penalties increase. If it continues, it escalates further." Adrian stepped forward, blocking more of the doorway. "Medical debt collectors do not show up in person. They call. They write letters. They do not pound on doors at 8 in the morning. So, tell me who sent you." The second man opened his mouth to retort, but Adrian cut him off sharply. "I want your names, your supervisor, your licensing information, and the company you represent." His tone carried a weight the men clearly were not expecting. They exchanged a glance, unsure whether to push back or retreat. "Sir," one finally said, his voice losing some of its edge, "we were just instructed to get a partial payment. She is months behind." Adrian folded his arms. "Then you can leave your paperwork and go. She will contact the office when she is well enough. But you will not show up here again. Not for $1, not for 100, not for anything." The man hesitated, then slowly reached into his bag and handed Adrian a folded notice. "She will need to respond within 72 hours, he muttered. "That is the rule." "Then she will respond," Adrian said. "Now leave." The two men backed away down the hallway, their silence proof that they had realized they were dealing with someone far above their pay grade. As soon as the stairwell door slammed shut behind them, Adrian closed Lily's door and locked it, his jaw still tight. When he turned, Lily was standing a few feet away, gripping the wall for balance. She looked both grateful and furious. "You should not have done that," she whispered. "You could get me in more trouble." "You were already in trouble," Adrian replied. "I just stopped it from getting worse." She shook her head, her voice cracking. "You do not understand. When people like that come, they do not stop. They call. They send letters. They show up again. They do whatever they want because they know we cannot fight back. He stepped toward her, slow and careful, as if approaching a bird afraid to be touched. You do not have to fight alone anymore. Her eyes flashed with emotion. Do not say that. You do not get to say that. I am saying it because it is true, he said softly. I am here, Lily. I am not walking away. She swallowed hard, her breath trembling. Why were you even undercover? Why did you put yourself in a place where you met someone like me? Why pretend to struggle when people like me do not get the luxury of pretending? Adrian exhaled, feeling the weight of her question settle heavily between them. Because numbers are easy to manipulate. Reports can be rewritten, but reality cannot. My foundation was supposed to help people, but I realized I had never walked the same streets they walk or seen what they face every day. Going undercover was the only way to learn the truth. And I am just part of your truth? She whispered. A lesson? A case study? No, Adrian said firmly, his voice breaking just enough to reveal sincerity. You are someone who showed me what courage looks like without even trying. You are someone who made me realize that I have more to give than money or projects or press releases. She looked away, blinking fast. I do not want to be someone's charity project. Good, he said, because that is not what you are. She pressed her fingers to her forehead, overwhelmed. Then what am I to you? Adrian hesitated, the truth rising in his chest before he could stop it. You are someone I care about. Someone I want to protect. Someone I want to help carry the weight. Not because I think you are weak, but because I know how strong you have been on your own. Lily took a shaky breath. I do not know if I can trust you. I do not know if I should. He nodded. You do not have to trust me fully today. Trust does not work like that. But let me prove myself one moment at a time. She stared at him, her emotions shifting like a storm behind her eyes. Exhaustion, anger, fear. But beneath it all, something softer, something she had spent her whole life trying to hide. Finally, she whispered, What happens now? Adrian stepped closer, gently but without hesitation. Now, he said quietly, we start over. Honestly this time. And for the first time since the truth shattered everything between them, Lily did not step away. The next week unfolded slowly, like a wound learning how to close without reopening. Adrian kept his promise to start over one moment at a time, showing up not with money or grand gestures, but with presence, patience, and sincerity. He visited Lily each day after work, always announcing himself softly before stepping into her apartment so she never felt blindsided again. He cooked simple meals when she was too weak to stand, helped her sort through her unopened mail, and sat beside her during quiet hours when she was too tired to talk but grateful not to be alone. As her fever faded and her strength returned, so did her walls, rising and falling unpredictably like waves. Some days she let herself talk freely about her childhood, her dreams, and her fear of being a burden. Other days she withdrew into short answers, wary of how easily he could hurt her without meaning to. But Adrian never pushed. He listened, he learned, and he showed her a version of himself that even he had forgotten existed. Near the end of the week, Lily finally felt strong enough to leave the apartment for the first time. They walked slowly down the block, the late afternoon light warm on their faces. She hugged her coat close, though not from cold this time, but from a quiet nervousness about being out in the world again. Adrian walked beside her, matching her pace without comment. When they reached the small park across from her building, she sat on one of the wooden benches and let out a slow breath. I used to come here when everything got too heavy, she said, when I needed to remind myself that life could still feel open. Adrian looked around at the trees swaying gently in the breeze. It is beautiful, he said. Thank you for sharing it with me. She studied him for a moment, then asked the question that had lingered between them since the day everything unraveled. What happens now, Adrian? What happens when you go back to your world? He paused, letting the sincerity of her worry settle fully before answering. My world is not just penthouses and boardrooms, he said. It is also this. You. What I learned here. What I felt here. I am not walking away from that. She frowned softly. But you are a chief executive officer. You make decisions that change entire industries. You are important. I am just trying to survive. He shook his head. You are not just anything, and being important does not mean being incapable of caring. She looked down at her hands, twisting them in her lap. What if I am not enough for someone like you? Adrian reached into his pocket, pulling out a folded piece of paper he had kept with him every day since the clinic. "Do you remember this?" he asked. She unfolded it slowly, her breath hitching the moment she recognized it. It was the overdue medical bill she had tried to pay with a $5 bill the night they first met. He had kept it. Carefully, he knelt in front of the bench so he could look directly into her eyes. "I kept this because it reminded me of the moment I stopped seeing you as part of a world I wanted to study and started seeing you as someone I wanted to know, someone whose courage I respected, someone I could not forget." Tears welled in her eyes. "Why did you keep it?" "Because it showed me something money could never teach me," he said softly. "Strength, dignity, the bravery it takes to keep living when life keeps knocking you down. You asked me, will it hurt, that night, and I realized the world hurts you in 1,000 ways that no one sees. I want to be someone who sees it, and someone who helps make it hurt less." A tear slipped down her cheek, but she did not hide it this time. "I am scared," she admitted. "I know," he whispered. "So am I." He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wanted, but she did not. Instead, she placed her hand in his, small and trembling but unmistakably willing. The moment their fingers intertwined, something shifted between them, something tender and fragile but unmistakably real. The sun dipped lower, casting a golden glow across the park as if sealing the moment in soft light. Lily took a deep breath, steadying herself. "If we do this," she said quietly, "you cannot disappear. Not when things get complicated. Not when I get scared. Not when you get busy." Adrian squeezed her hand gently. "I will not disappear, Lily. I am here. Fully. Honestly. This time, without any masks." She nodded slowly, letting the truth of his words settle in her chest. "Then maybe," she whispered, "we can try." He exhaled a breath he had been holding for days, and rose to sit beside her on the bench. She leaned lightly against his shoulder, tentative at first, then with a trust that was soft but unmistakably growing. As the last light of day faded, and the hum of the city rose around them, a new beginning took shape between two people who had met in a moment of fear, collided in a moment of truth, and found something worth holding on to in the quiet space between hurt and healing. And for the first time in a long time, Lily did not whisper, "Will it hurt?" Instead, she whispered something far braver. "Stay."